So I'm here with one of my favorite people, Lisa Tay, who is the Asia Pacific head of HR for Johnson & Johnson in Singapore. Lisa, thank you for your time.
No, thank you for having me. And it's great to be just meeting like this, during a time like such as this, actually.
Lisa, tell us about what it's like being a Asia Pacific head of HR at Johnson & Johnson during this time. Is it calm or anything but calm?
Yeah, and I would say it's not only Asia Pacific, right? But I think every leader who is going through situations or any crisis during this time. And how is it like? It's calm, I would say. And even if situations are not calm, I think as a leader, you have to be calm, right? So it's about inspiring others. It's about giving confidence, be it into things that the company is putting in or not. Certainly, things are very calm in the midst, I would say, of storms that is going through. And Asia Pacific now, I think it was about week 14 that we're into this situation, starting from China, and then now China is coming out of it, Korea is coming out of it, and we have seen, the whole pandemic, the cycle, I would say, and we are still not completely out of it. We're still watching it, but certainly back to your question, how has it been? It's been calm, and I think calm is what is needed as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you made an interesting point. You've seen it early. You've been involved in it 14 weeks, whereas obviously a lot of the world hasn't. What do you think that early mover advantage gave you as a HR leader and as an organization as well?
Yeah, I think early mover, I think has its opportunities and challenges, obviously. The opportunity really is also being in the forefront. There's no playbook, and you get to architect the whole thing, right? And then you got to get to figure out what is needed. You get to figure out what are the, how would I say, measures that need to put in place, and also what are the opportunities available in the market as well. So that, certainly was there. Challenges, again, it's the same thing. You have no playbook. You don't really know where everything is going, and there are hits and there are misses. So you got to have the risk taking. You got to also lean in very much into that conversation. And the opportunity then presents itself when it becomes a global consideration, and we are actually able to lead that conversation up front. And I think being in a global economy, and obviously being an American company, Asia is, I would say, further away from the mothership. And being in a situation like that itself, where it presents the ability for us to lead from the front on a very global, important topic, it's a crisis not to be missed. In that sense, it's opportunity not to be missed in the crisis itself. Obviously, I think Asia is taking very seriously as well.
So, how did the global organization leverage off Asia in a way that brought some quick learnings?
Yeah, and I must say that our global cooperation has been really good. Right from the beginning, 14 weeks ago when we started in this, our global health and services entity, which really looks after the health of our employees very much. We have always been in it, health and well-being of our employees, both physical, mental, emotional. So they have been part and parcel of our journey right from the beginning. So they saw what we went through. They saw the measures that were put in place. They saw all the activities that had to be there as well. And when it started appearing in all the other countries globally, they took the learnings very quickly and implemented it globally as well. They invited, obviously, our leaders, especially my leader in China, to be in many platforms and to really share the learning on the ground, not only in the policies and practices that we put in, but also the day-to-day considerations, what was happening, the emotional reaction people were having on the ground. So it was very quick, and it was always globally acknowledged, all the way from the top. Our chairman and CEO, Alex, has always been talking about it and thanking our China team especially for leading the way and for showing the world how things can be handled.
Yeah, I talked to your colleague Alex, obviously, who's the head of HR for China, and Johnson & Johnson has 11,000 people in China, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
That was quite
Absolutely.
an interesting case study of the size of an organization to be able to observe this with.
Yeah, it is our largest employee base outside the US, so a significant, I would say, operations of Johnson and Johnson globally.
And how do you think the HR agenda morphed and changed during a time like this? I mean, we know that the HR leader needs to be the all singing, all dancing thing, where sometimes the boundaries of the role, there is no clarity. But how have you found it change through this?
You know, the interesting thing is that you think about it as a change. Actually, I didn't feel a change,
Mm.
right? When things like that happen, every leader leans in, including the HR leader. You don't go, what is my role? Where does it end and start? That doesn't happen. So personally, I didn't feel a change. I mean, it's all about leaning in and you go, right? And you lean in and you got to see what the organization needs and what is needed itself, and then you lean in, then you put on the I wouldn't say put on HR hat, but as the HR person, you got to remember and help the organization remember the people, right? And be the heart, of the organization, and lead with care and lead with compassion and lead with empathy. And that is, I would say, central in our role, whether in a crisis or not. But during a time like this, it has to become even more pronounced, right? Especially if you look at companies around us, many of them have taken very, very drastic measures. And that's not aligned perhaps with how J&J runs the company, right? And so, truly, I think being the heart and soul in the organization, remembering, be guardians of the culture, and really drive that conversation forward.
And what about with the shift in working? Obviously, much of the world now being virtual, but indeed now much of Asia being virtual, which actually probably tracked behind the world in some respects, other than places like China. So we've got Singapore largely virtual now, Japan largely virtual. Have you seen a challenge in adaptation of this working style, or has it been quite seamless?
Right. So it's really been quite interesting. So when you talk about, the virtual part, I mean, for us globally, where everyone is, where possible, we are all work from home at this point in time. And has it been the virtual part of working? Has it been tough? I would say no. And because I think our technology group has been very, very quick to respond to this, even when they saw bandwidths, I think based instructed on some of our existing platforms, they have actually been able to put in new platforms and new applications very quickly. And so the ability and the equipping has come in very fast. And what has been really, really cool is that, even in our headquarters in New Brunswick, everyone has gone, work from home as well, including our chairman CEO. We just had an analyst earnings call, and everything was done from his home, right? So, and that has given, I think, the imagination for everyone to say, how can work really look like as well? Having said that, while working virtually itself, the technology and otherwise has not been very challenging, what has been, I think, challenging is really on individuals. When, especially in some countries, they may not have the space to do it, or in some households, they might have multiple children who are also home on home-based learning, and they have spouses who are also work from home, and you may not have the space to accommodate everyone. Like you in New Zealand, you could put people in different corners, but certainly in some places in Asia Pacific, you may not have the luxury. So that in itself has been challenging. I think the emotional and mental resilience has also, I think, been taken a little bit of a hit. So then the question is, what do we as an organization help people like this, right, who are adapting, who are transitioning, find a new rhythm, find a new normal in their workday.
And how have you been able to provide that help as a profession of HR, or even as a broader business organization?
Right, right. So we have been very privileged, right? As a healthcare company, I know healthcare and health and wellness of our employees have been central to the conversation of our company itself. So even pre-COVID days, We have always been running things like Energy for Performance in Life, as you are very familiar with, which talks about how do we manage our energy, physical, emotional, mental, as well as spiritual, which is a purpose conversation. And this really starts to amplify, during a situation like that. And we are coming from a strong base. So, what we have been doing is also given more heightened support in times like this. So things like online counseling, where for anyone who's needed a healthcare professional on the end of the call, where people can call and really get a diagnosis or an idea of where their situation is like as well. We have also launched an app called Me Equilibrium, which is kind of a resilience helping, so people can actually, tag through it or give a call as well. So these are all the support infrastructures that's done. And also on the benefit side, we have given leave to people who are not able to work from home for either, reasons that I talked about, or their primary caregiver. We have given leave for them to be able to do that. Paid leave from the company. And we have also allowed people to carry over more, of their leave that they were not able to take. So policies have been also put in place itself to, I think, take away some of these worries that people might have on the top of their heads. So as a function, we have done that. But I think what is even more amazing, as I share with you, is the leadership in J&J. You actually now, or rather we actually now, have leaders who are setting up virtual Zoom exercises. And these are managing directors of countries. And I look at my calendar, I think 3 times a week, I at least have an exercise class going on that is helmed by one of our leaders. So the role modeling exists very, very much. And that, again, it's not something that's built just in this crisis, but really from years and years of, I think, culture, purpose, that the company has come from, and really truly ingrained in our credo values.
Yeah, it sounds like what's been really important is that the wiring has already been there, or the bandwidth has already been there, but then it's obviously being tested during this time. And then what you're saying is that if it's not right, it needs to be tweaked. So there needs to be some agility with that, which you were saying through the technology platforms to be able to divert and change. But the fundamental platforms need to be there and operable, because obviously this is hit very quick.
Yeah, and not platforms only on the physical infrastructure, but platforms in the mindsets, platforms in the culture. I think that is very important because, we talked about New Zealand, we talked about Singapore, right? And you think about J&J. All this is really not built overnight. It came from years of trust being built, trust that people have in the management, trust people have in their leaders. You can have all the right measures, but when trust is not there, you can't implement very well. But because, I think in J&J, the employees have trust in the management that as a company, we put people first. We put, patients, we put our brothers and sisters who could be patients right in front, and we put employees right there. So the trust itself is something not to be undermined, and it really amplifies. And like you say, it tests the system in times like this.
So, Lisa, what do you think is the potential out of what we've been through now to change the way of working and developing careers and all the beauty that comes from this massive disruption and possible glimpse of the future?
Yeah, I would say a lot, right? And this morning, as I was getting ready for this meeting itself, and I was thinking the possibilities of work, becomes very, very unimaginable. I mean, as in that there's so many things that can be. I mean, I just think about your company. You have operated very much like this, no physical infrastructure, so to say, and very virtual. And so the challenge now for us is how do we do that for 140,000 of our employees globally? Obviously, there'll be things that need the brick and mortar, which is the supply chain, our manufacturing. It has to be there. But how can work be done? And does work have to be very location based? So even personally myself, through this whole time now, I find my hours have changed quite a bit. Um, and the question is, can any of these jobs that do not need to be, real time, real face to face every day, can it be done differently? So I think that in itself is something I'm very excited by. With this COVID situation, I'm sure it's testing many companies at how agile we all can be as well, and how risk tolerant we are in rolling things out and then finding, oh, maybe not, and then and changing and tweaking along the way. So the agility to be able to work a matrix organization, if a company has, I think it's amazing. I personally seen it, and I think about the picture of an elephant dancing, with tutus and stuff like that. And that's what we need to be for big companies. The opportunities are just amazing. And for Asia, I would say it is really showing us what is also possible, right? To lead the global conversation itself. And we have the platform, and it's up to us to really be dancing on that platform, be prima donnas, so to say, in that platform, and then have, make sure that we all come together and all be prima donnas together and be an amazing corps de ballet. As we put a really, I would say, a performance for people to enjoy, for people to learn, and for people to and grow together.
I love that. The final
That
question.
was on the fly, if I might say so. And I'm
Yeah,
assuming this part can be edited out.
no, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. The final question I have for you is just around the profession, the HR profession, and what opportunity you see for the profession to really evolve, beyond this, because this is really quite an HR centric phenomenon that we're going through. We've got physical health, we've got mental health, and then we've got this transformative shift to decisions being made almost exclusively virtually, at the moment. So for the HR profession, and I think The Economist did a really good article a few weeks ago on the chief people officer being at the center of this, but it's a fascinating time for the profession to evolve.
I think it helps to remind us, and this is something that I tell my team all the time. We are not here to support the business as a function. We are here to drive the business together. And in a time like this, we are put front and center whether you like it or not. Then the question is, do we have the leadership to be able to rise to that occasion? And then to say, and we no longer hide behind the conversation. We are here to support you, or, and you have to be front and center, drive the agenda, and also bring the agenda along with you and bring people along with you. So the leadership is actually quite different. So mindsets are actually quite different as well. And so the challenge, I would say, of an HR profession is, are we ready for that conversation? Do you want to be in that conversation? Do you want to be in that leadership position? Take the accountability, take the risk, as well as put yourself out there, right? Is leaning in that conversation itself. And then looking at all the different facets that are needed, not only from the operational part, which you also talked about, but also the strategic conversation. Strategic, yes, we are managing the operations today, but then what is the future conversation? What do business models look like? What do customers look like after this as well? What is the way we're going to market? And what do we need to get ready now for that? So that is a strategic conversation that you got to run in parallel with the operational conversation. So that is certainly the change in the profession that you talk about. But at the heart of it, we must always be very mindful of the heart and soul of the organization. And I have seen companies where, the HR is very much, how would I say, a little bit more macho, very much more business, and just drive the P&L conversation. But I think in the COVID situation, it brings to mind and it amplifies the need for us to play that role even more, because these are people's lives, that are being affected. So how do you bring that heart of compassion and empathy in into the P&L conversation, into the policy conversations. It's easy, as I always say, it's always easy to make the business decision. But if it's not intuitively economic, but maybe more compassionate, that is the harder conversation. And so the thing is, how can we actually influence and shape that tone at the top of the house with our business leaders?
Brilliant perspectives from Lisa Tay, Asia Pacific Head of HR for Johnson & Johnson. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure.